Hello everyone, today I'm going to be talking about the subclinical narcissist. Now what does I mean by that? Well, first of all, let's look at the common characteristics associated with narcissism and the various ways these things manifest. Narcissism, as I'm sure you're aware, is characterized by, among other things, having a huge sense of entitlement and an inflated sense of self-importance. There's being highly disagreeable, highly competitive, and there's a constant need for attention, admiration, and validation. There is also a lack of empathy for others. They can be very envious of others, yet believe that others are or should be envious of them. But we also see self-righteousness, a lack of humility, belief that they are always right, and they can be very vindictive if challenged. And like everything else, narcissism exists on a spectrum, and it can manifest in different ways and to different degrees, often depending on the person and their life experiences. The most common presentations of narcissism would be firstly grandiose, the grandiose narcissist. And here we would see haughty behaviour, arrogance. They believe they're the centre of the universe. They are special, they are fabulous. But then there's the covert narcissist, and this is a little more under the radar. This is the poor, woe is me, no one has ever had to suffer more than I have. And we do still see the grandiosity, however, it's internalised. They believe that they are misunderstood and unappreciated martyrs. But there are also altruistic narcissists, communal narcissists, there's even vicarious narcissism, and they're all variations on a theme, but ultimately, it's all about how they gain their supply, how they receive their validation, their admiration, and their attention. It's also about how they reject reality. Now, in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, there are 9 criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, but someone only has to meet 5 of those criteria for a diagnosis. And the criteria they meet would be long-term and pervasive. So, even with a diagnosed disorder, what we often see are different blends and shades, and to different degrees. So narcissism can be quite complex. As I often say, it's never a one-size-fits-all. Now that being said, there are probably those who have an undiagnosed disorder. Narcissists, well, they rarely go to therapy, and if they do, it isn't usually to work on themselves, because they believe they're fine as they are. The problem always lies outside of themselves. So, if the problem lies externally, then so does the solution. It's other people who have to change to suit them. But then there are those who may have deeply ingrained narcissistic traits, and some of those traits can even be quite high, but they wouldn't necessarily meet the threshold for a clinical diagnosis, hence the term subclinical. Now, they may not always necessarily be evil, malignant geniuses hell-bent on chaos and destruction, but they can still be highly envious, controlling, and vindictive. So they might not be extreme, but that doesn't mean they're harmless. And personally, I think this is the kind of narcissist we've all met at some point in our lives. But they can be very hard to spot because many are convinced of their own virtue or their own competency. Many may genuinely believe that they are good people, and they can put on a good show. They can be hard to spot because they have a well-polished reputation, even though it's just a facade that hides a self-serving nature. Publicly, they can be kind, altruistic, sometimes even heroic. They believe they are fighting the good fight. They believe no one has ever had it as bad as they have. They believe no one is as special as they are. And they are quick to become outraged on other people's behalf and pointing out what everyone else is doing wrong. They're never done telling others what an empath they are, and they can spot a narcissist miles away because they're so emotionally sensitive. They are a fountain of morality and virtue, and they will sacrifice not only their own, but they will sacrifice your time, your energy, and your money for the greater good. And they can lead you to believe that there is something wrong with you for not being okay with being exploited. And as is common with narcissism, they might engage in magical thinking, but they can be very persuasive, especially if it's wrapped up in some kind of noble cause. In some cases, they can create a lot of drama, just so that they can leap in and fix everything, be the hero. And what we often see are a lot of logical fallacies in their arguments, but they can use a lot of emotive language in order to manipulate and make it difficult for people to refuse them. But we see people like this everywhere in popular culture. Many of the traits are often exaggerated for comic effect in our favourite sitcom characters. We see the high neuroticism and the erratic behaviour in someone desperate to show a version of themselves which doesn't match reality. We see a false image of grandiosity and superiority. The inept yet pompous, opinionated fool who believes that they are entitled to be in control without any leadership experience, qualities, or skills. The person who sucks up to those in power while treating those they consider to be inferior with contempt. They exploit others, they lie to and lie about their friends just to suit their own agenda. There's a deluded sense of self-importance and entitlement, and believe that others should be envious of them and they can behave like a petulant child when others are more accomplished or competent. It's the person who believes they are more talented than they really are and that everyone loves them. And we laugh at their mishaps, their foolishness. We laugh when they get their comeuppance. But sadly, real life is different, and we don't always get to laugh, especially if you're on the wrong end of people like this. Because in real life, they're not always that easy to spot, at least not at first. And many people who have been in narcissistic relationships often ask why they didn't see the red flags, the warning signs of manipulation and coercion. One of those reasons is because they weren't exactly waving them in front of you and saying, hey, look at what I'm doing. Because when it comes to a mid-range narcissist, their manipulation is often hidden behind good intentions. They claim they just want to help people. They just want you to be happy. And because of their reputation, the work they do, the causes they support, well, we don't always get to see it. Especially when their coercion and domination is disguised as being helpful or just giving helpful suggestions. And as previously mentioned, some mid-range narcissists at their very core may genuinely believe they are decent and good. They believe that they are kind and considerate, maybe just misunderstood. So in some cases it isn't always fake, just delusional. They genuinely think they are doing good. However, their help is more often than not about feeding their ego, rather than real care. And when you disagree or criticize them, well, they don't reflect or discuss openly. Rather, they feel wounded. And as is common with covert narcissism, they might even weep openly saying, well, you don't love me the way you should, you just don't understand me. But remember, this is not about you. It is about their need to be seen as the hero. And if you don't, they might even lash out, try to convince you that you're the one at fault. A narcissist's facade is their public persona. It's who they want the world to see them as. Some present as superior, always knowing better than you. Some may play the clown, thinking they're a comedian. Others, and quite prevalent these days on social media, they play the morality card, crusading for justice or fighting some bad, horrible enemy. They virtue signal, they loudly proclaim their goodness, or they victim signal, playing the wounded hero. They are the person who helps others in distress while craving the spotlight, and they believe their own story so deeply that challenging it can feel like an attack on them. But their facade isn't just for show. It can be a shield against reality. It defends them against criticism and hides their lack of emotional empathy. They might cry or seem upset whenever they hear some terrible thing that has happened. But this is not about feeling other people's pain. It's performative. It's known as performative empathy, and it's more about creating and maintaining an image. Because mid-range narcissists lack emotional empathy. They can't truly feel, sometimes they don't even understand what you feel, but they are experts at performing care because it gives them attention. Can also, in some cases, give them control. So they can say things like, I just want to help you to be a better person. But it's not about you. It's about making them feel good about themselves. It's about getting admiration from others. In some cases, it's about making you dependent on their kindness. They see others as an extension of their goodness, and they'll try to recreate in you the image they prefer, and they become frustrated whenever you resist. They'll take over your projects by suggesting they think they know what's best, and they'll either not care or understand why you're bothered that your project has been ruined by them. They can also become angry whenever you won't or you stop playing along. But really, whatever role they play, it's a performance. It's like a child mimicking what they think a good person looks like, which is why they can struggle understanding the difference between a good thing and the right thing. Now, when it comes to manipulation, the mid-range narcissist's kindness often comes with strings attached. Some may well just be blind to their own flaws, but some have no problem doing or saying whatever it is they have to get what they want. And here we could see a Machiavellian side to them. They can use benign manipulation tactics. They'll target your guilt, your fear of public opinion. They'll use pity plays, provocation, anything they have to, just to keep you in line. They'll use phrases like, after all I did for you, or you're so ungrateful. They'll even triangulate. They'll say things like, Dave and Jane were shocked that you would do that, or that you would say that. But when you begin to resist, that's when things can take a turn. They devalue. They'll subtly undermine your confidence. They'll say things like, other people know better than you do, or some people might get hurt because of your selfishness. And they may well be cloaked in helpfulness, but the motivation is to keep them superior and in control. And if you challenge them, that's when they might smear you to others, claiming that you are jealous, you are on the wrong side. They might even claim that you are a narcissist. And they'll rally their friends, their supporters, or their followers to attack or ostracize you. It's like cancel culture on a personal scale. And here we would see their vindictive nature. Mid-range narcissists are quite good at climbing into positions of influence or authority. Usually, their charm gets them there. But once in power, either their lack of competency begins to show, or their real motives are revealed. Now, if it's a lack of competency, rather than rely on others to guide or advise them, they tend to get rid of those who outshine them, and they start to make decisions which don't make any sense, but gets to make them feel powerful. And they can run businesses, projects, little community groups into the ground, having people doing pointless tasks that lead nowhere. And if it is just about having power, they will misuse their position. They will bully. Any dissent is driven out. They can create an us versus them culture, and they can justify any of their actions, saying that the victims deserved it or they just don't matter. But either way, whatever it is they get involved with, it isn't long before it begins to look more like a cult. In their personal relationships, they might tell their victims, I just want to help you. I just want you to be happy. I want to bring out the best in you, and only I can see the real you. Really what they're saying is, I want you to be happy, but on my terms and when I say so. I want you to be dependent on me for happiness. No one and nothing else, just me. And believing their own narrative, they might even try to convince others that they are doing them a favour just by dating them and becoming angry and frustrated when they don't see it that way. And due to their lack of empathy and lack of insight, they may well be unable to see that they're being controlling. Sometimes, depending on how deeply ingrained the traits are, they may well see it, but only for a moment. Their maladaptive defense mechanisms kick in, and that is quickly rejected. Their behaviour is rationalised. They only want what's best for you, and you're the one who's being difficult. You are a horrible person for not playing along. And in the event of a breakup, well, you were a narcissist who took advantage of a kindly empath. Now, thanks to the internet, people can be educated on pretty much anything these days. People are educated on things like mental health, psychology, and of course, narcissism. Now, narcissists know the information is out there as well, and many have learned the language. Mid-range narcissists tend to be masters of denial. Some might claim that they are self-aware, but they just can't see the patterns in their own behaviour or the impact it has on others. For instance, if they were to watch a YouTube video about narcissism, well, none of that applies to them. And if it does, well, they're justified in their behaviour. Other people have provoked them. You call them out for their manipulation, for their toxic behaviour, they know the buzzwords, and they will use the language to deflect. They'll say things like, "You are gaslighting me," or "You are just using Darvo," or "You are projecting." They might even claim, "I know what a narcissist is, and that's not me. I help people. Ask anyone who knows me, they'll tell you I'm an empath." What you typically find is that every former employer or every ex-partner was a narcissist. They might even make false admissions just to seem humble. They might claim things like, "I'm such a people pleaser that people take advantage of me." But remember, it's all a performance. They believe their own narrative so fully, they just can't see the truth. And the more you push, the more you try to convince them, they'll just blame shift. They might say things like, "You're upsetting me," or "Why are you doing this to me?" In other words, you become the problem and they are the victim. You are the reason for their problems. They'll start performing victimhood, claim that you are the reason for their problems. They might say things like, "I can't help it, I'm triggered. You know all those terrible things that happened to me, and you're supposed to love me, look after me." What they're really doing is giving you responsibility to manage their triggers, to manage their moods, and manage their behaviour, while they behave as if all their terrible issues give them some kind of moral immunity from responsibility. Now, another common characteristic of narcissism is all or nothing thinking. It is black or it's white, it's right or it's wrong, it's left or it's right. And to a mid-range narcissist, the world is really quite simple. They are good, and anyone who disagrees is bad. There's no middle ground, there's no context or nuance, and if you don't comply with their narrative, they get upset. Not because you're wrong, but because you're not following their script. And because many do genuinely believe that they are right and that they do more good than wrong, they don't get it whenever they're challenged or held to account. If you challenge their superiority, their competency, or their intentions, again, you're not just wrong, you're the villain. In fact, you're probably some mad, crazy psychopath. And they'll invalidate your opinions, your beliefs, your views. They will make personalised attacks. They will refer to your age, sex, background, size, whatever they can target. And they can be quite venomous with their labels. These days, the most common labels used just to quieten dissent or to vilify those who challenge them usually end in ism, ist, or phobic. But they throw these labels out hoping that something will make you back down. But as is common with narcissism, it's not usually a well thought out strategy. Allegations and slurs from a narcissist, particularly a mid-range narcissist, tend to be poorly thought out, emotional, and childlike. They'll spread stories about how you're trying to ruin their life, how you've ruined other people's lives. And due to their low resolution thinking, they believe the more times they say these things, the more true it becomes. Now, when a mid-range narcissist doesn't get what they want, that is generally whenever the mask slips. Remember, in the early days of getting to know them, well, they could put on quite a good performance. But remember, it was a performance, and that's not easy to maintain. When you get close, you begin to notice cracks in the performance. and their actions don't always match their words. Maybe they can be overly insistent about their kindness, and they get upset whenever you don't applaud their efforts. They might sulk, might give you the silent treatment, even make passive-aggressive comments or smear your reputation. They might threaten to leave you, or leave the group they're in, threaten to join another group, hoping that someone will beg them to stay. And this isn't always malice, it's more a crybaby tantrum. It's a desperate bid for some kind of attention or validation. And that is the mid-range narcissist at work. And because of their sense of entitlement and their need for control and disagreeable nature, when they don't get what they want, if they feel undermined or criticised, that's when we see the vindictiveness surface. Commonly with the mid-range narcissist, though, the revenge tactics are often poorly thought out, reactive, and childlike. That being said, just because they may be more Wile E. Coyote than Hannibal Lecter, that doesn't make them any less harmful. It is not pleasant being on the wrong end of someone who believes they are entitled to hurt anyone any way they want, just because they're offended. So just to summarise, I want to leave you with a thought or two. Mid-range narcissists aren't all the monsters we think they are, not like their malignant counterparts who may have other things like psychopathy and sadism co-occurring with the narcissism. That being said, it doesn't mean they're harmless. They may be inept, they may be deluded, but they can still wreak havoc and cause chaos in other people's lives. They may have a reputation for being kind and decent, even being professional or being funny, whatever it is, but they are often living in a fantasy world. Their need for control and validation can leave you feeling drained. Their manipulation can leave you doubting yourself. They believe they are entitled to special treatment and attention. They believe they're superior, and they believe they are more competent and popular than they really are, and they can become venomous and petty if they are challenged. But just because they might not have a personality disorder doesn't mean you can change them. Their maladaptive defense mechanisms kick in at the thought of having to face themselves. Reality is rejected in favour of their fantasy. They would have to want to change. They would have to put the work in, which requires feeling vulnerable. And if they did want to change, all you, I, and others can do is encourage and support them. What we can't do is we can't do it for them, and we can't be held to account for their relapses. But as I mentioned earlier, in many cases, they don't believe they need therapy. They believe they are fine as they are. It is everybody else who is the problem. It is everybody else who needs some kind of help. If they do go to therapy, it can be because there is some kind of immediate crisis. But even then, they just might want the therapist to resolve it for them. Or, once that immediate crisis passes, they just resort back to type. But in order to manage yourself in their company, you focus on your own perspectives. You focus on reality, not their facade. You don't expect self-awareness from them. You don't expect accountability no matter how empathic and self-aware they tell you they are. And don't get mixed up in their drama. Don't over-explain yourself. Remember, just like all shades of narcissism, they thrive off your reactions. They thrive off your frustration. They thrive off your trying to appease them. I'm Darren Magee. I hope you find this interesting. Thanks for listening.